Amongst the 5 families of New Capenna, each knows its role. The maestros, artists, connoisseurs of assassination. The riveteers, the muscle, the union. The cabaretti, dictating culture. The brokers, serving their clients, for now. And finally, the Obscura, hidden from the scenes. Their wizards and mystics design the flow of information, not just where it's going, but also when it's found. Still, even a family fortune told needs someone to actually take care of business, and that's when they summon Toulouse. They call her Lights Out Loose. With a quiet shadow generator, she ensures that if she wants you gone, you'll never see her coming. But if you have Toulouse on your side, there's no better ally. After all, family comes first. Toulouse, Clever Conductor, is an Obscura 3-mana free one. When she enters, she connives, letting us draw and discard a card, and if the discarded card is a non-land, she gets a +1/+1 counter. Then, whenever we discard 1 or more cards, she exiles them from our graveyard. Finally, when she dies, we return all the cards Toulouse had exiled back into our hand. Toulouse is fascinating. She's got a lot of small but noteworthy attributes that allow her access to a wide range of synergies, and that lets us build a deck that is incredibly varied and exciting in its gameplay. Toulouse Clever Conductor is my current favorite Bracket 2 deck. I know that there are a lot of folks that are seemingly a bit allergic to existing in Bracket 2, but I'll happily tell you that Toulouse works best in that lower power environment because it lets us play a larger range of unique and interesting cards. We can also build a deck that's very grindy and low to the ground, always trying to push any bit of damage it can. We're always attacking and hunting down our opponent's life total. And I think that's very enjoyable. If I have to bring just one deck to game night, this is the one. I'll take you through my entire personal list today, but note that because it's my own personal list, it's not really budget. There are a couple of expensive cards in there like Flash Photography and the Mana Base. You can trim most of that and the deck will still work perfectly fine, and then it's really nice to upgrade over time. In fact, I put a more baseline budget version up on my Patreon, so if you're interested in that, you can check it out there. But unfortunately, there's one expensive card we can't pass up, and that's Monument to Endurance. As you might imagine, this is a discard deck. Not in the way that we want to make our opponents discard, but we want to discard cards ourselves. Monument to Endurance is a 3-mana artifact that lets us choose 1 out of 3 whenever we discard a card. We can either draw a card, create a treasure token, or make our opponents lose 3 life. We can, however, do only each of them once per turn. Within the discard deck, Monument to Endurance is the perfect engine piece. It replenishes our hand as we discard from it, it provides mana for explosive turns, and it's one of our best finishers. Monument to Endurance is unfortunately irreplaceable for this deck, and when I play it against my friends, this is the card that gets them on high alert. It's not just essential because it makes our discarding so powerful, but also because it works incredibly well with some of our other synergy packages, like cloning and low-cost reanimation. But we'll get to that later. First, we have to discard cards, and for that, our best option are looters. The first thing I do when putting a new deck together is add Shoreline Looter and Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. Although in this deck we play a couple more of course. Ledger Shredder, Smuggler's Copter, Looter Ilkor, Wharf Infiltrator and even Lock Cole. I play looters in nearly every deck because there's a lot of value to having cards that filter through your hand across a game of Commander. A simple Shoreline Looter on the board can nearly guarantee that we are never flooded or screwed, and that we find removal when we need it, and it gives us easy access to attack or combat damage triggers. Sword of the Animist, Dowsing Dagger and Grim Hireling are truly insane cards when paired with an unblockable little guy, and Rafine, Scheming Seer, Camise, Obscura Oculus and Leader Super Genius can even buff our looters and help them push for a bit more damage. There's also Rona, Herald of Invasion in the deck, which doesn't usually attack, but well, there's a limited number of attack-based looters, so we'll take what we can get. Sometimes we can flip Rona though, and that can be a lot of fun. Looting is made even stronger if we can turn the filtering into actual advantage, which is something Toulouse does for us. Any card we discard is snatched up by her, stored for later. This creates a really interesting gameplay pattern. Usually when discarding like this, we have to decide which cards we aren't going to play this game, but Toulouse keeps them all safe for us. Nessahol Primal Tide is an incredible late game finisher, but if it's turn 3, we don't really have a use for it. So we simply loot it away, store it underneath Toulouse, and then get it back later. This is where we're already getting into all of the individually cool cards in this deck that I'm really excited to tell you about, like for example Gix, a Yawgmoth Praetor. This is a black 3-mana 3/3 who lets any player pay 1 life to draw a card whenever a creature they control deals combat damage to one of our opponents. Gix is a bit of a group hack card. He lets our opponents draw cards too, but our deck is usually much better at utilizing Gix than our opponents because, well, we have a bunch of unblockable stinkers. We also don't mind too much if our opponents draw some cards with Gix because that means they are smacking each other and that's some good extra damage here and there. We're trying to grind them out, so we'll happily take any bit of damage we can get. But the main reason Gix is in this deck is his second ability, which, you would usually never use, but it's really fun here. For 7 mana, so this is definitely a finisher, we can discard any number of cards and then exile as many cards of target opponent's library, and then play cards from among them without paying their mana cost. It's not uncommon that in the later stages of the game, we have 15 to 20 cards stored underneath Toulouse. We can then return those cards to our hand, use them to fuel Gix's activated ability, which presumably wins us the game. And even if it doesn't, then we just put the cards back underneath Toulouse and use them for something else, because well, Gix wants us to discard them. Now, to get our cards back, we need Toulouse to die, which is best done by sacrificing her. However, we don't need to sacrifice her often, just once or twice per game usually, so instead of playing these standard repeated sacrifice outlets, we got some cool stuff. Desperate Plea, Chthonian Nightmare, Ruthless Technomancer, Emptiness. Bone Shards is a terrible removal spell, a 1-mana sorcery that destroys a creature or planeswalker, but it also has the additional cost of letting us either sacrifice a creature or discard a card. This can be both a sacrifice outlet or a discard trigger. Is Unwanted Remake just a better removal spell? Yes, of course, but that's the nice thing about Bracket 2. We can focus on synergistic cards. We don't need to just play good stuff. For this deck, I included a range of thematic Obscura cards that fit into the gameplay and aesthetic, but aren't necessarily the strongest. Let me just be honest, Obscura Interceptor is kind of ass, but it really elevates the vibe. So does Voidrend, although that one is definitely a better card. Nothing quite as funny as hitting the Blue Mage with "this spell can't be countered." Chemise also fits into this category. He is fine and works well in this deck, he's just not that good outside of it. Finally, Obscura Charm, a 3-mana instant that either returns target multicolored permanent with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped, counters target instant or sorcery spell, or destroys target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. This one is really cool because it's tailor-made to interact with Toulouse. Well, realistically it's probably tailor-made to interact with Raffine, but we're playing it with Toulouse. If someone tries to bounce or exile our commander, which is the worst thing that can happen to us, then we can counter that instant or sorcery. If it's not an instant or sorcery, we instead just kill our own commander to recover our cards. And if Toulouse ends up in the graveyard, with or without our help, then Obscura Charm can very specifically reanimate her even at instant speed, which is actually incredibly helpful. Oh, and it's also just a counterspell. There's a lot of charm to countering something with Obscura Charm rather than just counterspell. I don't know, I like having these thematic elements. I think that's one of the big reasons why Bracket 2 is so much fun to play. If you enjoyed the video so far, please give it a thumbs up and check out my Patreon. I actually just added a new tier that lets you come play Magic Jeopardy with me once a month. I'll host a Discord call for you all and then we'll play Magic Jeopardy together with a new custom game created specifically for you. There's also lots of other content on the Patreon, so go check it out, link down below. Thanks. Most of our sacrifice outlets, the aforementioned Desperate Plea, Chthonian Nightmare, Ruthless Technomancer, and Emptiness, although I know that Emptiness isn't technically a sacrifice outlet, but it kills Toulouse, so that's good enough. All of these also let us reanimate Toulouse. Not necessarily at the same time, but that's another thing they can do. So can Sevine's Reclamation, Redemption Choir, Squall, Seed Mercenary, and Sun Titan. Low-cost reanimation is so good. Including reanimation in this deck may seem a little weird, because usually when you're reanimating you want to discard a big scary card and then bring it back for cheap. But with Toulouse we can't do that because she'll just snack the card out of the graveyard, so we can't reanimate it. But this is where I want to make a case for just reanimating fairly. Not using reanimation as a huge mana cheat, but rather as sustainability. During the early game, we can use these guys to ramp by repeatedly reanimating fetch lands. And then as the match continues, things are going to die. That will just happen, and then we bring those things back. I mentioned earlier that Monument to Endurance always draws a ton of attention and is often targeted down as quickly as possible. But it's a 3-mana permanent, so we can't just reanimate it. Same for Toulouse. I usually only pay mana for Toulouse once per game. We play her early, turn 3 usually, ideally after we've already played a looter, and then for the rest of the match we just sacrifice her when we want our cards back and then reanimate her to keep her on the board. It gives her a very unique vibe. She's shifting in and out of the shadows, always dancing with death. I really like that. People also don't want to kill Toulouse, so keeping her untapped on our board keeps us safe from attacks, because if they attack us, we block, and then we draw 15 cards, and I don't want that. Just by her nature, Toulouse gives us a lot of control over the game. Another interesting way to sacrifice Toulouse is cloning her. Will of the Timur, Replication Technique, Flash Photography. All 3 of these let us create token copies of any permanent. This can be Toulouse, which lets us sacrifice the original, giving us a huge hand of cards, while also immediately putting a new Toulouse on the board to act as a new storage. But the best thing about Will of the Timur, Replication Technique, and Flash Photography is that they can copy any permanent, like for example a Monument to Endurance, which is one of the strongest things we can do. This tends to be how I push for a victory. If we have 2 or 3 Monuments to Endurance on the board and a discard outlet like Ghostly Pilferer, Psychic Frog, Dream Trawler, or Nessahole, Primal Tide, then we can start pitching cards on every player's turn, constantly refilling our hand and burning everyone out. A discard outlet with 3 Monuments of Endurance in play allows us to deal 9 damage to all our opponents on each player's turn, 36 per turn rotation, by either discarding 2 and drawing 3, or discarding 3, drawing 3 and creating 3 treasures. There's a lot of explosive potential here, but we're not dependent on it. Overlord of the Floodpits, All-Seeing Arbiter, Dream Trawler, Sun Titan, and Nessahole make for quite the impressive beatdown squad. And of course we can copy them too. Well, except for Nessahole, but Nessahole is enough of a monster by itself. We can also take a token approach with Cryptcaller Chariot. Cryptcaller Chariot is a black 4-mana vehicle that creates a 2/2 zombie whenever we discard a card. As I'm sure is obvious by now, we tend to do that a lot. There are so many different setups we have in this deck that let us discard very frequently, like for example Monument plus a discard outlet, or just a bunch of looters on the board, or well, literally just Ledger Shredder by itself. And all of these cards also work with our Sacrifice Reanimation package. Toulouse often has a 15 to 20 cards stacked underneath her, so when we pull that out, then we have a giant pile of cards in our hand, which we then have to discard to hand size, and that of course triggers all of our synergies again. That's why our Sacrifice Reanimation package is so closely tied together. We don't want to lose our pile of cards because the pile by itself is useful. We can go into our end step, discard 10 cards to hand size and make 10 2/2 zombies. That is some serious pressure. There's still another branch of synergies too that we haven't even talked about yet. Tevil's Judgment is a black 3-mana enchantment that works very similarly to Monument to Endurance. It's also 3 mana. Keep that in mind, the 3-mana slot is so good with white reanimation. Anyways, Tevil's Judgment. Whenever 1 or more cards leave our graveyard, which is something that Toulouse does, she exiles them out of the graveyard after we discard them. Then we can choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. We may either draw a card, create a treasure token, or create a 2/2 zombie. These zombies aren't quite as effective at closing out the game as just directly damaging our opponents, but Devil's Judgment is still an absolute powerhouse of a card in this deck. And it's not the only effect that cares about cards leaving our graveyard. Fang draws us a card, and On Wings of Gold creates a zombie by also buffing all of our other zombies. There's also Ketramos, the New Dawn. Although this one we have to be a bit careful with. Ketramos, the New Dawn is a black and white 3-mana 4/4 with Menace, Lifelink, and Indestructible. These are obviously great stats and keywords, so it comes with a downside. It can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. This isn't even close to a challenge for us, so we don't really have to worry about it. Then, whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile during our turn, we draw a card and lose a life. This is of course another great engine piece. We discard and immediately get to draw another card. But I do want to speak a warning. There's something that can go horribly wrong here. If we end up having to discard to hand size while Toulouse and Ketramos are on the board, and we don't have any mana open to sneak in a removal spell, then we die. That's because we'll discard during cleanup, which triggers Toulouse, which triggers Ketramos. Ketramos then draws us another card, which then forces us to discard to hand size again. We're stuck in a loop that'll draw us our entire deck and costs 1 life per card, so we die. There is a way we can use this as a finisher, because we also play Quasar, Augur of Agonies, which is another Obscura card with great aesthetic, and lets us drain target opponent for 1 whenever we draw a card, which turns this into Nif Miss It at home, but don't get your hopes up that this will ever happen in an actual game. It hasn't happened for me. Quasar is mostly just there to be an additional little synergy, because naturally we draw a lot of cards, so we get to ping people a little bit and we can offset some of our own life loss. Since we're attacking a lot, we don't tend to be the best on defense aside from Toulouse, so we do take a bit of damage here and there, and so having even just a little bit of life gain really goes a long way. Now, to avoid the Ketramos Toulouse issue, we could of course play cards to make it so we don't have a maximum hand size, but I personally don't really like playing with those, and also discarding to hand size is actually useful in this deck. So I just play carefully, and if I ever die to this, then honestly, that's just funny as hell. But if this bothers you, then just take out the Ketramos. It's not a necessary card for the deck. Finally then, just a few bits and pieces here and there. Swords to Plowshares, Generous Gift, Stroke of Midnight, and Lauren of the Third Path don't interact with Toulouse, but this is just my white removal package that I insist upon. 3 Steps Ahead, Bitter Triumph, and Refute also interact and actually play into our theme. 3 Steps Ahead is particularly amazing, great card. Counterspell when we need it, but you can also make a Monument or Toulouse to help finish out the game. Claim Jumper and the Regalia ramp independently, and Dreamscape Artist also ramps and synergizes with discarding. It's also just a really neat card that you never see. Raven Eagle is some fun graveyard interaction that also drains a little bit when we draw cards, and honestly, this card is actually way better than it seems. Like, I've been having great games with Raven Eagle, just been performing exceptionally well. And then we also have Ral Zarek, Guest Lecturer, which makes for a really annoying in-between during our reanimation loops that our opponents have to figure out a way to deal with. Ral Zarek is not a huge deal, but he can basically just be our first step to reanimating, where we first bring back Ral Zarek, activate him, and then bring back what we are actually looking to reanimate, and that then leaves a Ral Zarek on the board that will make our opponents discard a card next turn, so they kind of have to deal with it. And those small pressure points can go a long way, because they just make it so our opponents have to worry about something, and that distracts them from us smacking them in the face. And that's cool. We also have big interactive spells, of course. Archfiend of Ifnir, Spectacular Pileup, and Starfall Invocation are our sweepers that fit into our theme. And finally, Street Wraith, because when else do you get a chance to play this guy? This deck has many different ideas stretched across multiple small packages that still manage to be individually useful and synergize with each other. This is something that's difficult to accomplish. Often decks like this are either unreliable or they depend on tutors, which then remove that scrappy feeling of needing to figure out how to approach each game from a new angle that I look for from diverse package decks. But here it works. Toulouse acts as a cornerstone for all of these different ideas and connects them to each other. Synergies that would usually be too small to justify become able to reach across the entire deck, and that makes for a great gameplay experience. I really love this deck, not the least because it's beautiful. When I say beautiful, I do mean that quite literally. The new Capenna set had this beautiful, fantastic foiling here, these gilded foils. They are raised, they are textured, and you can see just like how fantastic it looks. Honestly, the camera doesn't capture this properly because it can't capture like the raised foiling, the actual gilded parts super well. But I just think these cards are beautiful. And because New Capenna wasn't particularly popular, they are quite cheap. Like these are not expensive, except for Void Rend. Void Rend does cost a couple of bucks, but the rest of these are very, very affordable. Not only that, of course, there's just like, I think the All-Seeing Arbiter is a gorgeous card as well, also from New Capenna, of course, and it's quite good. It's quite good. And then we've got the full art basic lands from the set that, you know, they work really well, I think, alongside everything else. And again, I think they just look nice, just pretty. And this one has nothing to do with New Capenna. I just like it. This one is from everybody's favorite set, Ether Drift. Look at that, the Crypt-Coded Chariot. For me personally, I like it when a deck looks pretty, and when that prettiness is affordable, that's perfect. And in this particular case, that is, well, the case. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is a deck that tries to be pretty aggressive. So if you give it a try, what I would recommend is Mulligan for freelance. You do want your freelance, right? But that should be possible. I do play enough. And then go for, like, ideally an early looter, turn 2 looter into turn 3 Toulouse. And then on turn 4, you either want to establish some sort of discarding payoff or some sort of like continuous ramp engine. So like a Sword of the Animist is great, a Regalia is great, or if you already have a Monument to Endurance. If you don't find any of those pieces, then just try to get even more like looting onto the board so you can eventually find your things. Because this is a deck centered around looting, it is incredibly dependable. It always like moves through its pieces very quickly, and it lets you find what you need for the situation. I mean, admittedly, it also plays just a good chunk of interaction by itself, so it's resilient because of that. It is a deck that I'm very proud of, and I just play myself. Like, this is just one of my own personal decks. And yes, I made this video because of the deck interview with Tulok. This is not meant to be some sort of like attack on him or anything. I just wanted to share my own version of the deck. I do play more lands than him though. You can see that as a bit of an attack. Play more lands, people. But yeah, in this deck, we don't really need to worry about overdrawing on lands anyways, because we're just cycling past them, and we can use, you know, like the lands for discard material later on, and that is valuable by itself. Something that Tulok focused on was the idea that Toulouse creates a range of triggers when you discard a card, right? Like you draw a card, you discard a card, and then you exile it out of the graveyard. And that's true. That's definitely something that happens with her. And that is quite valuable. But of course, she's also a 3-power creature in white. You can even do something that I don't play, but if you want to. So I don't play this because me and my friends in bracket 2, we've got a pretty hard line that we don't play free spells. That's just something we don't do, right? No free spells. And okay, that's just how we play. But I personally think that the flares from Modern Horizons are totally fine. But again, I don't have them in the deck because of my local environment. But if you want to add them, you know, they're really good because Toulouse is a 3-color creature, despite having pips that make it really easy to cast her. You can cast her with just blue mana, but of course you can also adjust that mana cost as you need it, which makes it trivially easy to get her out despite being a 3-mana creature. But then, you know, you can just sacrifice her into the Counterspell Flare or the Sacrifice Flare or the Board Protection Flare, and that will be very powerful. Again, that's something that you might want to include in your own version. I'm intentionally not including it here because of my local environment and kind of like the sort of like unspoken agreement I have with my friends. Well, it's actually been like somewhat spoken. Anyways, link down in the description. Go check out the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want the like more budget version, I'll put one on Patreon. And go support me on Patreon. We'll definitely appreciate that. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.